Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to a special episode of Submission Radio. I'm Dennis Shkradov here with Kacper Zalowski. It's the 13th of July. Cass, a couple of weeks off for Submission Radio. It's great to be back here on Submission Radio.
Yeah, that is where we are. Submission Radio is exactly where we are. It feels good. It feels good to have the batteries recharged. Feels awesome to be back doing the show. This is like an interim show. We had UFC 189 interim title line. This is our interim show. We're still sort of on holiday, still kind of doing our thing up in the snow, might we add. But we figured UFC 189 is such a huge event. We can't just leave you guys hanging. And honestly, we wanted to do a breakdown of the event. So that's exactly what we're doing here. There's no interviews per se like we normally would. For those new to the show, we'd normally be doing about 2 to 3 interviews with certain fighters or personalities. We do have guests, however. We are going to be doing a roundtable discussion, breaking down the event, talking about just our thoughts in general. A lot of things happen, obviously, in terms of the production, the new logo, things like that. Conor McGregor, what's next, all those sorts of things. So that's pretty much what we're going to be breaking down in this episode. So hope you guys enjoy it. There's a lot to get through, and obviously we're going to be introducing our guests very soon. As always, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, and of course the YouTube channel Submission Radio AU. Almost forgot it there. Big show, isn't it, Dennis?
Yeah, it's a big show, Cash. Now, we don't usually mention this, but we do have a Facebook page as well. It's facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. We've got a lot of great stuff on there. If you guys are more kind of Facebooky people, because Cass, a lot of people aren't that into Twitter, especially in Australia. Jump on there, give us a like. We chuck up content, there's a lot of updates, and we like to communicate with our listeners through it. There's a lot of great people on there. Shout out to Shane Williams and a lot of the other great people that comment on our stuff. Really do appreciate it, and we love to hear what you guys think. And also, on the YouTube channel, obviously the show hasn't been going on, so there's no really new interviews, but there's a really fun clip. It's called The Worst Broken Noses in UFC and MMA. Basically, it's a special direction that we're going in. It's a BuzzFeed type direction. We break down some of the worst, most gnarliest broken noses in MMA and UFC. I mean, when you watch this thing, we dare you not to look away from the screen in disgust. There's some very graphic images, so we do have to give you guys a warning about that.
Yeah, pretty gruesome stuff. Obviously, Rory MacDonald's broken nose and shattered face didn't make it into the video because the video's about a week old, but pretty popular. So definitely check that one out, guys. But I think that's pretty much enough from me. We're going to be starting this roundtable discussion, and I'm keen as mustard, Dennis, to hear who we've got on the show. Obviously, I know, but it's time to introduce the guys and get this roundtable started.
All right, guys, it's time to kick off this breakdown. Here live, we have Tommy Toehold from the Tommy Toehold Show and the one and only Dave Meltzer from Wrestling Observer and MMA Fighting. Gentlemen, welcome to Submission Radio.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome having you guys on for this roundtable discussion. We figure it's a fun mix of guys. We're going to have a good chat about a few things. Before we talk about UFC 189, obviously something that transpired over the weekend, just want to kick this discussion off with Chris Cyborg. She had another dominating performance at Invicta over the weekend, 45-second TK over her opponent. She plans on retiring in 3 years' time and starting a family. She's going to possibly try to cut down to 140 with Ronda, not moving up to 145. Is it time to say the super fight may never happen? Dave, we'll go with your thoughts first.
Well, Ronda's been pretty specific about 135, and she, for a long time it's been like it's going to be the next fight. She's going to go to 135, but it always just seems to be, well, now it'll be the next fight. And I just don't sense that she's going to get to 135. If they'll agree to do 140, I'm sure that she'll go for 140. She's about as lean as you can get at 145, but there's ways you can, switch from weightlifting to running distances, and you can get weight off. I mean, it is possible, but she has not done that, and so we're kind of at this stalemate, and it's weird because she needs to fight more than Ronda. I mean, Ronda's going to be drawing against anyone she goes against. She'll draw more with Chris than anybody else, but Chris, if let's just say she retires in 3 years and just fights in Invicta against Faith Van Duyn and other women like that, there will be fans who will remember her, but she'll never have any kind of a mainstream name presence or be remembered, as this giant figure in the history of women's MMA by the masses.
Tommy, what are your thoughts, man?
I very much agree with his sentiment. I think she needs the fight more than Ronda does. Ronda is a star, and she's transcended the sport. She's done a lot outside the sport. And in terms of her drawing power, I mean, yeah, she definitely would get her biggest numbers with Cyborg. But again, yeah, I don't really see her necessarily needing that fight for her legacy or anything else. Sure, there will be hardcore fans that will say, "Oh, well, you never fought Cyborg," but I do think Cyborg needs it more as well. And I think, much like Dave said, if she can drop some muscle and find a way to make it 135, my thing is, yeah, you could do it at 140, but I feel like I don't know if would they be able to still do the title fight that way, because I feel like having a belt on the line would be
there'd be no title fight at 140.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
Right. See, I think that's another a part of it. I don't think the UFC would go for. Having a title on the line would be a much bigger draw, in my opinion. So I'd love to see it. I think everybody wants to see it, and hopefully we get to. But yeah, I'm not really sure anymore. I don't know. I gave up on that one a little while ago, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. I never thought we'd see Mayweather-Pacquiao. So
I didn't think we'd see. Sorry, go, Dave.
I on Thursday night when they asked her, I was at the show, and when they asked her, is your next fight going to be at 135? And when she started beating around the bush, it was just like, I think that was the moment. I mean, I think I'd probably, like you, given up on it a couple, not all that long ago, but recently. Maybe even when this fight was announced at 145. But when that was announced, it's kind of like her UFC contract basically says you can't get into UFC unless you make 135 once, and then the first UFC fight's going to be with Ronda, and it's like, if you're, why keep putting it off? And it just doesn't seem mentally. She's already decided that she can't make the weight healthy, and I mean, maybe she can't, but I every time I see her, and I saw her at the show last night, and she's so darn big. I keep thinking that, like, I've seen big bodybuilders and I've seen, big wrestlers, and they lose muscle if they have to, move down a weight class. And a lot of fighters do that when they kind of get strummed out, if they want to drop a weight class. I mean, they're not as big, and they change their training and they change their eating habits, and it can be done. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what, if it's a psychological thing or just, I can't answer for her, but I just know that, when you see her in public and she's gigantic, you just go, well, she's not trying,
It's interesting, Dave, because I was watching the interview that Ariel was doing with her post-fight, and when he brought up the whole weight cut, it just didn't seem like she had much confidence in herself, like you mentioned, to get down to the weight. What I'm curious about, and I'd like to get your guys' opinion on this as well after Kacper says what he thinks about this whole Invicta and Chris Cyborg, Ronda Rousey thing, is in the next 3 years, is there much of a chance that there'll be a 145 division in the UFC? Because now I'm sort of past her fighting Ronda Rousey and onto the thought, will she fight in the UFC before she retires? Because maybe she won't get the Ronda Rousey fight, but at least if she fought in the UFC, her name would grow substantially. People would know her a lot more. I don't know what you guys think, and maybe after Kacper gives his opinion on the Ronda Rousey, Chris Cyborg thing, you guys would sort of share your opinion and let me know if you think a 145 division could be in the UFC in 3 years' time.
Yeah, see,
I think it's more likely they do 125 or 105 than 145, because look at who she's fighting in Invicta. There's really, I don't say there's nobody, but there's very few. There's hardly enough women to do a division when you see the competition there. Whereas at 125, there's a lot of the 135 women that I think could drop to 125. And if you go to 105, I mean, you've got a lot of women that you've seen. Some of the 115s could drop to 105. As far as the 135s in UFC to go up to 145, I don't know that you really are going to have many people clamoring to do that, except for maybe the ones that just want to avoid Ronda. But none of them are that big of names. I mean, and they're going to be greatly outsized if they were to fight Cyborg as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think they would do a 145 division. You're right. There's not really that many females to make a division, and you don't have the big names, the big personalities. You don't have like a Gina Carano where you can sort of build divisions around a Gina and a Chris Cyborg. I think with 140, you mentioned, Tommy, that you've sort of given up on this and that crazy things have happened. I never expected CM Punk to be in the UFC, so I don't think
That's true.
The idea of a 140 fight with Ronda, it's not that crazy if you think about it, because it'd be great if there was a title on the line. But I think the fact that these guys, like Ronda has a big name, huge name, Chris has a big name to hardcore MMA fans, I think the fight would be a sell either way. And at least if they do it at 140, if Ronda loses, you could, in terms of marketability, you could say, well, she lost to a bigger girl and she didn't lose her title either. So, in 3 years, I think the UFC has to do it, because really the 135-pound division in the UFC, it's a really thin division. I mean, Besh Correia is fighting, and she's undefeated. She's got that going for her. But a lot of people are saying, Besh, if the division was more stacked, she wouldn't even be fighting Ronda for the title. And after Besh, like, where do you go there? You'd be hoping Jessica Eye wins so that you could set up possibly Jessica Eye versus Ronda Rousey. But again, how many people would actually buy that? So I think this is like not on the same magnitude or level, but this is like the Mayweather-Pacquiao of women's MMA at the moment. They have to make it.
It feels the same way. And Mayweather-Pacquiao, I mean, I'd long since given up on that. I mean, years and years ago, I thought it was probably going to happen, and then it was one of those things where they kept stalling and stalling. But then, you got to a point, and I think it was with Pacquiao, where all of a sudden he wasn't drawing so big anymore, so he needed that match, and then they kind of got together and go, hey, let's do it. And it may take more than 3 years for that to get done. There probably will be a time that, maybe in 5 or 6 years, but the problem is on that one is like do you want to do the fight when they're both out of their prime? Which sort of is what happened with Mayweather and Pacquiao.
Yeah.
If it takes that long for two women who are both very stubborn about, Chris, I think, thinks that if she can wait it out and get it at a higher weight class, she's got a better chance of winning. I think that's her mentality, and that Ronda needs it, but I don't know that Ronda needs it. And Ronda's there thinking Chris is a cheater, and she's not going to give her any benefit of the doubt. And if she can make the weight, fine, we'll do the fight. But if they can't, I've got a million things I can do, and she doesn't have to fight anymore either. I mean, that's the other thing. She's got her commercials and she's got her movies and everything. So she could probably be stubborn the longest when it comes to, a standoff.
It's interesting as well. Sorry, Tommy. Hopefully we don't see the fight in 10 years or 20 years' time in Bellator. Headlining
I was
Bellator
just about, you stole my joke. I was about to say it. They're both going to retire, and then 10 years from now, Bellator will put it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Wouldn't really surprise me either way. Let's talk about UFC 189 itself. Before we talk about actual fights, a lot of things have happened recently. Obviously, there's the Reebok deal, and with that comes a brand new logo. I think the C is now a little bit different, and then you've got the new production value. The stem face, the pain is gone. Different intros, different music during the tail of the tape. What did you guys think of this whole new look? Did you like it, or did you get a little bit sentimental and miss the old stuff? We'll go with you, Tommy, first. What do you think?
I really liked it. That C, I tell you what, they changed it, and everything's different now. I did actually like the production quite a bit. It was definitely different, but I thought it was very clean, and it looked very professional. The video graphics inside the octagon before the title fights, that just blew me away. That was amazing. There was a lot to like about it. And everything said about the Reebok stuff, and I know there's quite a bit of controversy. I did think that the uniforms looked very clean in the fights, and also the new graphics for like the timer and the rounds. I thought all of that was very good. I liked it a lot. I was actually watching the fights with a few people who don't really watch fighting much, and they had actually commented on some of these things after I'd mentioned to them, and they thought it was pretty slick too. So yeah, I do like where they're heading with this.
Dave, what did you think? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I just thought overall it felt like they stepped up, and it just felt like a bigger event. I think it's. I mean, the things before the title fight. I mean, that kind of blew me away as well, and I didn't expect that to happen. And it felt like a really cooler, more in product, which is good because they've been around for a long, long time, and there's this kind of thing where if you're just kind of same old. So I think that they took a kind of a step forward at a good time. It was almost like when you came in. This was, and I even thought about it even before, because between the Reebok deal and the drug testing, both coming in. It was almost like this is the first show of the new era of UFC. It was like we had this era, and it was a good era, from say 2005 when they got on TV till July of 2011, which was kind of wild west, and a lot of characters and the unique sponsors and everything. And now we're in and kind of like easy to beat drug testing. Now we're in a new era, and it all changed. It felt like it all changed in one night. And the good thing is that the first show of the new era, was a great show. I mean, I would hate to start a new era and then have this terrible show, and we obviously had the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, it wasn't UFC 81.5. I was gonna say, I have to say I didn't really like it that much. I'm one of those guys that when my house gets moved, when my girlfriend moves my house around, I get upset because I miss where the couch used to sit. And the improved production value, I got to give them props for that. But I know with this card you had a lot of different nationalities, you had a lot of different flags, and it really did feel like almost like an Olympic type event where you had all these different countries representing each other. But will it work for these smaller fight night events? The other thing is, I don't know that we're going to get as much of it at smaller fight nights. I think there's going to be like some of the stuff that happened was probably unique to this show and will only be used at other giant shows. Maybe 2-3 shows a year. And like the Sinead O'Connor stuff, we'll probably get that at giant fights going forward because they've kind of set a standard, but it's certainly not going to be on every pay-per-view. But some of the other stuff, I can't see it on fight nights. I think there'll be something where it's almost a thing where the pay-per-view, it becomes more of an event because you have that, and you don't get that on your TV cards. Yeah, that's right. You don't want to weigh in, and every flag they have is like American.
Yeah, pretty much.
Every guy on here is American. We just want to prove that point. But apart from that, look, I respect the fact that they're trying something new, and I understand it. I mean, from a marketing standpoint, you really want to get all the different countries involved in it. I mean, if we had some Australians on the card and we saw that Australian flag, I mean, I think we'd feel a bit patriotic ourselves. So I understand where they're going from it, but it will take some getting used to in my regard.
I made a joke to Dennis actually when we were watching it. I'm like, wow, is the UFC teaching everybody to be racist? Because here you're going to be picking like people based on country. But obviously I'm joking, and I think I get what they're trying to do. I think it's kind of like with football teams and basketball teams and whatever, even like Australian footy teams where you've got the Sydney Swans or the whatever LA Lakers, and people go for those teams just purely because, hey, that's my town, that's my team, I want to go for them. And I think they're sort of trying to get, well, if fighting's in our DNA and blah blah blah, we get it, we like it, and all that kind of stuff. If you're in a country, if you're saying India and you see an Indian flag, you're going to like that guy and you're going to go for that guy and possibly buy the product just because, hey, you've got your own countrymen fighting. So
Great Khali is a great example of that.
Great Khali, yeah, of course, the super heavyweight division. One thing, I thought the graphics themselves were really nice. They were really crisp. I wasn't bothered by the countdown or the clock in the middle of the screen. I thought it was cool, and they've got the little white line for which round it is. The few things that I really miss, and maybe it's just growing pains, I didn't like the new intro where it was the UFC and all the flags were going in there. I just thought the music was really meh. And then the actual Face the Pain, Stems Face the Pain, which used to really, really get me pumped up before every pay-per-view, they've sort of done a really lame remix of it. And it's almost like they took the old song, desexed it, cut its balls off, and then you've got this new one with just like zero energy. That's the one thing that I didn't like about it. And then the music during the tail of the tape was a little bit crappy as well. I honestly miss the Gladiator music. Seems to me like, that's all gone and that's in the past and we're just going to have to deal with it. But I think the fight nights themselves will look completely different because obviously the prelims, they, like watching the prelims on Fox, they look the same as they always have. And it wasn't until I went back and rewatched some of the prelims where I was like, oh wow, this feels really, not cluttered, but it just didn't feel as clean, and it kind of made me appreciate the new graphics. Moving on, guys, let's start talking about some of the fights. Dennis Bermudez versus Jeremy Stephens, that's the first one that we have to talk about. Just want to get your thoughts, Tommy. What do you think about this one?
I thought it was awesome. Minus the missing weight, and unfortunately Robbie and Rory were after that. That would have been fight of the night, no doubt. That would have been fight of the night on a lot of cards. And that finish was insane. That flying knee, he sort of just jumped straight into the air. He wasn't like it wasn't angled towards him or away or anything. It was a spectacular finish to a spectacular fight. It was very bloody. It looked like Tarantino directed that fight. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought that was a really fun fight, and great for Jeremy Stephens. I mean, he did miss weight and everything, but man, he definitely needed that, and he delivered. And I'm interested to see where he goes in the division.
Yeah, what do you think about this one, Dave? What did you think of the fight? And also, is it pretty much over in terms of Dennis Bermudez's title campaign?
Yeah, it hurt bad, and the other thing, it's kind of weird when you because again, it hurt bad, but the other guy didn't make weight, and he did put on a spectacular performance until he got kneed. I mean, they both did. They showed a lot of heart, both of them hanging in. I think a lot of people would have checked out earlier, especially on both sides. I mean, God, Jeremy Stephens was like this water faucet of blood coming out of his head. But yeah, it was an incredible fight. And I don't think, as far as like the Dennis Bermudez, as far as like fans and everything like that, it's those type of fights kind of build your name. But in his case, I don't think it helps him when it comes to the title situation, where he was, he kind of couldn't afford a loss right now, I didn't think.
It's interesting as well, Dave, because you mentioned Jeremy missing weight. It's like, what do you do with him now? Obviously, he's a great talent, and this is a really, really big win for him. But the guy did miss weight. He's had some issues in the past, obviously, with warrants and stuff like that. Do you trust him? Do you put him in a position in the division where he can become one of the faces of it again? Or are you a bit wary knowing that he didn't make weight and he's had some issues in the past?
I don't put him against the top guys yet. But if he goes in there and again, goes against a guy between 5 and 10 and makes weight and scores a big win, I think he can, at that point, you start thinking about it. But yeah, maybe not next fight. But who knows? It's like a lot of it is just like who's healthy on a certain day when we got a match, and he's coming off of a big exciting win, and if the right guy is free, he could go against almost anyone in that division, except for the top maybe 4 guys. I would say I probably wouldn't want to put him against, but yeah, I mean it's a spectacular win, and he's always been an exciting fighter. So there's I think that probably right now not the top guys, but with one more win and everything, at that point, you make weight the next time and people forget you missed it the time before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely an awesome KO to add to the highlight reel. I mean, we were talking about how crazy it was. No one really does flying knees and they don't actually step in. He literally just countered him on the same spot, like you mentioned, Tommy, straight up in the air. It was an awesome knockout, and I think these guys are really similar, and it's good that they did fight because they're both sort of relegated to that fun fighter slot. None of them are really going anywhere towards a title shot anytime soon. Obviously, Jeremy Stephens coming off 2 losses to Charles Oliveira and Cub Swanson. With Dennis Bermudez, he had that 8-fight win streak, and now it feels like a long time ago. And unfortunately, his 2 biggest tests in Jeremy Stephens and Ricardo Lamas, he's basically failed them. So, just in my opinion, I think that whole 8-fight win streak, the momentum is pretty much gone, and he's going to be starting from scratch. I mean, he's on 2 losses in a row. They say sometimes 3, and you may be fighting for your job. So that's just my take. The weird thing was, afterwards, Dennis tweeted out, Dana just offered me a rematch and I accepted, #192. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think, because it didn't seem like a rematch would be justified at all. And Dana actually spoke to Megan O'Leary afterwards and claimed that he never spoke to Dennis. So that's not true at all. Do you think there'd be any reason?
That's weird. That's weird how people miscommunicate something like that. But it's not like something they do is to go right to the rematch, unless it's just one of those things, like I said before, where we've got a card that has to be made right away, and we just got to come up with matches, and these 2 guys are healthy on that day, and it's been done before. But that would be something with a lot shorter notice. I don't think that'd be something that. I was surprised to hear that, but we'll see. I could see from his perspective asking for it, because he didn't make weight, and it was a great fight, and a rematch of a great fight is cool, and neither of the guys are going to be in a championship fight coming up, so it's not the worst thing to do it, but usually they don't like to go for straight rematches unless it's a championship match where there was a lot of they have certain rules when it comes to rematches, and this fight wouldn't have fit in one of those. It wasn't like a disputed decision or anything like that, or a fight with an eye poke where you just want the fight to, you didn't get a real conclusion.
And like there was, other than the weight cut, there was zero controversy. And I'm just wondering, Tommy, you're a creative guy. We see what you do with Triple THS. Can you see any way how this could have been misconstrued? Like, how do you misunderstand something? Is it like Dana walking by, good fight, kid? Yeah, all right, I accept. 192 it is. Like, how does a misunderstanding like that happen?
I think maybe it might just be Dennis trying to be a little bit slick and throwing that out there in a tweet to see what sort of reaction it got. Because that's what I would do if I wanted the rematch, even if I hadn't spoken with Dana yet. I've actually heard of a few other fighters doing things similar where they don't actually have information yet, but they just throw it out there because it's such a mess with communication sometimes. So, yeah, I think I don't think anybody told him that. I think he just maybe thought, we'll throw this out there, see what people think, and go from there.
Yeah, I think we've all been there where we want to eat something for dinner, and then we'll be like, "Hey, didn't you suggest that we have Mexican tonight? I thought you said Mexican." And then before you know it, everyone's eating Mexican, not knowing no one even suggested it. So maybe you're right. Maybe he's being quite slick there.
Yeah, he's a sneaky man, that Dennis. A fight that we almost missed talking about, Gunnar Nelson. Just want to get your thoughts, guys, on his performance. What does the future hold for the Icelandic sensation? Are we just scratching the surface with him? Tommy, we'll go with you first.
That was an awesome performance. Thatch is an incredible opponent. I think it was a great matchup for him just because Thatch is one of those dudes that he's just so big and looks impressive, and I think that was the kind of win that Gunnar Nelson needed on a big card like this. And, he'd only had that loss to Rick Story previously, but I still felt like he didn't really gain a lot of momentum outside of Europe. And I think this was one of those fights that, being in the United States, being a card that was going to be seen by a lot of people, really kind of cemented his spot against a guy who, again, not obviously, Brandon Thatch, I wouldn't say is a top level guy, but an opponent that is physically intimidating enough where I think a casual fan would probably get interested in Gunnar Nelson and his kind of weird, quirky, very dry personality that people seem to be drawn to. So I think that was a really big win for him, and hopefully that will get him to be a little bit more popular here in the U.S. markets, because I think he's a lot of fun and could be a big star.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about stoic dudes, but everybody's drawn to them. People find them fascinating. And before we get Dave's thoughts, Tommy, just sort of speaking about that fight, I just want to know, because I actually thought Brandon Thatch was going to win. He was bigger. Gunnar Nelson's a small guy. Did you, if you were picking Gunnar Nelson, did you expect him to win in that way, which was almost like it wasn't a knockout, but it was almost like a huge knockdown into a submission?
Oh, absolutely not. I didn't see that at all. Honestly, I wasn't sure how this was going to go down. I thought maybe there'd be a scramble on the ground, and maybe Gunnar was going to be on his back and then somehow was able to flip it over or something and then get a sub. I wasn't sure how it was going down, but I definitely didn't think there was going to be a big shot against Thatch, just because you don't really think, he's such a big guy and he's a very durable guy, minus the Benson Henderson fight where he got, subbed. Previous to that, we hadn't really seen any sort of issues with anything, chin or anything else. So, yeah, it was surprising the way it went down. But, again, I think that was good because it also showed that Gunnar is versatile, and he's got that striking power, too.
Yeah. I definitely didn't expect him to beat Thatch on the feet. Dave, what did you think about this fight and Gunnar Nelson's performance and his future?
Yeah, I thought Thatch was going to win the fight. But the minute it went to the ground, I thought it's over for Thatch, because I know that Gunnar... I think the difference in the level on the ground was so great. I didn't think he'd be able to get him down. I thought that Thatch would keep it standing, and Thatch would beat him that way. And once he knocked him down, it quickly changed my mind on that. I think the whole thing with Gunnar is, if Gunnar can get guys on the ground, I don't see too many guys beating him. But the Rick Story fight kind of told me that if you can't get guys on the ground, you don't even have to be a great fighter to beat him. Now, he did get anyone can get that knockout or that knockdown and everything like that, and he has enough standing to where he can do that, but I still can't get that Story fight out where he had a couple of rounds and when he couldn't get the knockdown and he couldn't really get the fight to the ground against a good wrestler, it wasn't like, it's not like Story's that great of a striker yet he completely outstruck him. So I see a ceiling on him right now, unless his wrestling gets a lot better or unless his striking gets a lot better. And I just think that this was a win that he got. But I don't see him as like a championship contender, because when you get to that top level, if the guys know we got to avoid your ground game, he's going to have to knock them down or take them down, and we'll have to see if he can do that with better guys than Brandon Thatch.
Dennis, what did you think about the man of many words?
I'll tell you what, it's interesting because we did an interview with him sort of a few weeks out from the event, and he was supposed to still fight John Hathaway, and we sort of expected him to be pretty quiet, but I guess because it was just over audio, he was very outgoing. He was even joking around. I was like, wow, what is going on right now? Is this actually... We almost wanted to make sure it was actually Gunnar Nelson. We're making him turn his video on his Skype just to make sure he didn't lie to us and put one of his team members on the show. So he mentioned to us that he wasn't very motivated near the end there in his last fight. He took too many fights back to back, and that loss really made him go back into the gym and really focus on his training for the first time really in a really long time. And I don't know how much more focused he was in training, but I mean, that fight just really showed a bit of a different side to him that I didn't think he had. I agree with Dave. I don't think he's a contender just yet, but I'm sort of one of those daydreamers. And, I caught myself daydreaming a fight between him and Robbie Lawler at one point. And, he's just an exciting guy and a fresh addition to the division. So if he can keep this up, I welcome him to get up there in the contender status, and I welcome him to possibly fight for the title in the future. Now, if he fights a guy like Johnny Hendricks, if Hendricks is champion again, well, that's going to be an extremely tough fight for him, like the Rick Story fight that Dave mentioned. But if Robbie's still champion somehow, if he does beat Hendricks, who knows how it all works out. I'd love to see a fight between those two. I think it'd be incredibly fun.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be ready to put Gunnar Nelson up there just yet. I think fights against Johnny Hendricks or Robbie Lawler will be extremely tough for Gunnar Nelson. I think he's got quite a few fights ahead of him before he gets in there. But I think it's a good win for him on a really big show. And this isn't like, a small Sweden card or a small Germany card or, UK card. This is one of the biggest shows of the year. So I think this really sort of... there was so many casual fans and casual eyes watching this event. It's a really good win for him. Gunnar Nelson's still the type of guy that I think could possibly headline a show. And if it wasn't for, say, the co-main event and the main event, that's a performance that we could really be talking about a lot more today. So I'm just going to say the jury's out still on Gunnar Nelson. Super impressive performance. And like you mentioned, Dennis, I wonder if it had something to do with the fact that the fire is back. Allegedly, Gunnar Nelson is, back and interested in the actual fight game, and he's got the passion with him after his, I think it was like an almost year-long or 9-month layoff. So we'll see if in the next in the next fight he'll be starting to knock guys out. I want to start talking about the co-main event, guys. This is actually a really, really crazy fight. You spoke about Tarantino fights before, Tommy. Rory MacDonald, he was meant to be the guy coming in to beat Robbie Lawler. I think most journalists picked Rory MacDonald. First of all, did you expect Rory to win? What are your thoughts on his performance? And is it starting to look like Robbie Lawler's going to be a long-term champion in the welterweight division?
Yeah, or we go. Who's going first?
Sorry, Tommy, you go first. Yeah.
Okay. I honestly wasn't sure. They'd already had that fight previous, and it was a relatively close fight. So I thought that maybe it would be very similar, and I honestly thought it might be a coin flip. After the first round, I thought it was going to end up being one of those Rory fights that was a bit like the Jake Ellenberger fight, where nobody really does much of anything, just because Rory's style, sometimes he's able to dictate what everybody's able to do, but that was not the case, and Robbie really got after it. I don't even know. That was the craziest. That fight was nuts. I really thought Rory was in big trouble until he got Robbie on the ropes, and then I thought, well, maybe Robbie's in trouble, but then again, Robbie Lawler hasn't been knocked out in over a decade. So I kind of figured his chin's pretty strong, and it sure did hold up. And it was such a weird, not a weird ending. It was definitely, there's a little bit of a video clip of Rory after the fight on the ground.
Where he almost passes out?
Yes,
brutal.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. You could tell he was done. And I've never really seen that. His face was so broken, and he'd taken so many shots that he just sort of laid back and was like, okay, this is it, because that was mind blowing to me. But yeah, an incredible performance by Robbie Lawler, and I don't know if we're gonna see him long term or not. I think Johnny Hendricks is always gonna be a problem for him, and I think no matter what, that's always gonna be a coin flip. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we'll see him as champion for a while or if it'll go between him and Johnny. I feel like Robbie can be beat. You know, obviously he's had some issues in the past previous to his title run, but I don't know. I have a feeling it won't stay there permanently. I think it'll jump around quite a bit.
Sorry to interrupt here before Dave jumps in, but Tommy, since you're talking, I just want to get your thoughts on the hairdo. What do you think of that mohawk type hairstyle that McDonald was going into the ring with? Do you rate it?
You know, I thought it was very Taxi Driver-esque, very De Niro.
Yeah.
I thought it was perfect for him because, you know, he has this sort of mystique of being a psycho, even though he is probably just a regular guy. But that really played into it very well, I thought. And yeah, I dug it. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I really want to see him with the slick back hair. I think what was Christian Bale's character in American Psycho? Something Bateman, Patrick Bateman, I think.
Patrick Bateman, yes.
I really want to see him rocking a Patrick Bateman style hairdo. I think everyone's calling him the Canadian Psycho and has been for a long time. When he changed his nickname, I was like, yes! And then it was the Red King. I was like, what? No way, man. Went in the wrong direction. What did you think, Dave? Did you pick Rory MacDonald to win this fight? What do you think about Robbie Lawler? You know, people say that the title's going to jump around, but so far it hasn't. You know, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I went back and forth all week. I just kept remembering the first fight, and I was thinking in 5 rounds, Robbie Lawler's going to tag him once, and that will make the difference. And then as the week went on, I was leaning more and more to Rory MacDonald because I kept thinking, well, just technically he's better, and they fought a couple of years ago, and Robbie probably, you know, age-wise, Robbie is probably the same or going down a little, and Rory should be going up a little. And the fight could have gone either way the last time. So then I was like, I think Rory's going to win. Plus, Rory had looked so good in his recent fights. And, you know, I mean, if Lawler didn't knock him out in that last round and didn't land that punch, you know, Rory's going to win the fight 3 rounds to 2. So it was another close fight. The thing that I'm taking out of this is what's going to happen to Rory MacDonald, because he looked to be this young guy who was going to really, you know, maybe be the next dominant welterweight. And he's still young, but, you know, he took a real beating. I mean, this is a different, you know, you just did that. I'm just wondering, like, you know, will he be the same? Because I don't think anyone wants to take that kind of a beating. I mean, and Robbie Lawler cannot be mentally broken. I just think that so he can be beat, but you know, he's going to be fighting there. You know, like with the Hendricks fights. I mean, he was there until the final moment of both fights. And I think he's going to be like that. I think he's very tough. He's going to be very tough to finish. Although Rory was close to finishing him in the 3rd. Yeah. So I just wonder what's going to happen to Rory after this. As far as you know, Robbie Lawler. I mean, I don't know who else in the division is coming up. I think that he can probably beat Condit, although Condit would make a hell of a matchup for him. I think Hendricks and him is a coin toss for sure, because the 2 fights were very even. And I don't know that there's anyone else. I don't think Woodley. I don't see Woodley beating him. So that's kind of where I see the you know.
What do you think about Lombard, Dave? What do you think about Hector Lombard?
Lombard's an interesting character, because Lombard's so explosive and everything that Lombard could be dangerous without a doubt. I think that he may be, you know, he may be the opponent that can give Robbie a real interesting fight, because you know, but again, he's going to be out for a while.
Yeah, unfortunately. What did you think, Dennis? What did you think of the fight?
Yeah, you know, it was one of those fights. It was exactly like Tommy said at the start. It looked like it was going to be a Rory MacDonald fight, and I think everyone was a little bit disappointed, but then eventually it picked up. Very interesting as well when Rory threw that head kick. Robbie blocked it. However, some of the head kick went through, and he had a bit of the unbalanced legs there in the fight. It was a very interesting point in the fight. I just thought it was a great back and forth fight, but I agree with Dave on the fact that how much did it take out of Rory MacDonald, because apparently he was in the back and he didn't know what year it was. He got hit in the head so hard. And I mean, we've all seen it with Muhammad Ali, a lot of the greats in boxing. We haven't seen it as much in MMA because the sport is still young. But I mean, these kind of fights really, I mean, I'd imagine would take a lot out of a person in terms of brain damage and, issues with that. Also confidence, like Dave mentioned. So on that side, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with him in the future. I mean, I believe he would bounce back, but this is a big sort of thing for him to come back from. On the other side of the coin, Robbie, I mean, I think he's got the most confidence that he's ever had in his career. I mean, are you kidding me? That kind of performance against McDonald, he already beat Hendricks. I mean, I think the most dangerous thing about him is he just has extreme confidence in his chin. He has extreme confidence in his abilities. And who knows, in the next fight with Hendricks, maybe that's what it would take for him to beat him. I don't know. But yeah, overall, it was an absolutely crazy fight.
One of the reasons I think why I wrote off Robbie Lawler was because of the fact that, to me, it just seems like Rory MacDonald was constantly improving, and Robbie Lawler, even though he had improved, it just feels like, look, he's been in the fight game for so long, how much more can he really improve? And, sorry, I said before the title hasn't jumped around, that's an absolute lie. It has, between obviously him and Johnny Hendricks. And, those fights with Johnny Hendricks, they were so close, and yet you see Rory MacDonald, and his fights were pretty dominant, especially the one against Tarek Saffiedine, and you just kind of thought, look, Robbie Lawler, he's a guy who's going to fight on heart, and he's obviously got the knockout power, but Rory MacDonald, like those guys at TriStar, they're so focused on game plans. I just thought that Rory would come in with the game plan to beat Robbie Lawler, and like you guys mentioned, the fight, I remember when it started, I was like, man, no wonder they didn't publicize this fight that much. It was, I think it was the whole of the first round. I don't even remember when it kicked in, but we had people going outside for like toilet breaks and smoke breaks, and then we started yelling like, guys, you're missing it. It turned out to be one of the craziest fights. Dana White was talking about it was the greatest fight ever, and Joe Rogan, of course, went bananas. I don't know if I agreed that it was like the best fight, but there was a few interesting things, like Rory MacDonald, apparently he couldn't see and he couldn't breathe after, I don't know, I think the first or I think it was the second round. And once it escalated really quickly, going back and forth. It looked like Robbie Lawler really had this one, and then Rory MacDonald, like you mentioned, snuck in that head kick. Sort of really came out of nowhere, and even watching the replay, didn't look like it really got in. It wasn't clean at all, and yet, you don't really see Robbie Lawler rock that much. The ending itself, I mean, I'm not a squeamish guy, but even that made me a little bit squeamish in that video you talked about before, Tommy, where it looked like Rory MacDonald may have actually passed out. Some people are saying from the actual pain, and then you see his face afterwards. It was definitely a crazy fight. But in terms of Rory MacDonald, I mean, I feel like he's always had the pressure on him, training with GSP, being under GSP, being at TriStar. People have always called him the future of the division. I don't know whether the pressure got to him or what, but it just seems like he's never lived up to that sort of, what's the word? The standards that everybody has set for him. And after this fight, who knows? He may never even be the champion. I mean, in saying that, as much of as dominated as Rory MacDonald got, like you mentioned, Dave, he was going to win most likely if it went to a decision. So, as crazy as it sounds, I could actually see this being a rematch in the future.
I'd just like to also hear what Dave thinks about Rory's style, because Dave, in the first round, he did control the action, but he didn't throw many shots. I mean, in those kinds of situations, would you want to see Rory sort of capitalize on the fact that he's got his distance down and really start to create some damage? Because it really feels like he did create more of his damage later on after his face was busted up.
Yeah, but that's just his style to take the fight in that direction. I think that the thing that I thought was the key to this fight was Robbie Lawler's takedown defense, because it was tremendous. Because there was a couple of times where I remember one time where Rory MacDonald did a shot and you didn't see the shot coming, and those are the shots that get you. As far as takedowns, because he was mixing it up, and Robbie Lawler reacted so quickly and sprawled, and that was the difference in the fight. I think if Rory MacDonald would have connected on 2 or 3 takedowns, I think he would have the ability to stand with him, and then the confidence to take him down when he needed to take him down, and Robbie would be playing defense. But without that threat of the takedown, it became a stand-up fight, and that is Robbie's world. As far as just he has the power, and he did a number on him. Standing, although in that third round and early fourth round, I thought it was I thought Lawler was a goner in the third when it was over, in the very beginning of the fourth, but he started to get his composure and he started taking over in late 4. But even so, going into 5, it was, I had it 3-1 and all 3 judges had it 3-1. So, in favor of Rory MacDonald. So it was like, I was thinking we're getting a title change. And I didn't see, again, we'd seen a lot of stuff and everything, and Robbie certainly has the ability to put somebody away, but I didn't see there was no knockdown or anything like that. So I thought that like it was going his way, and then he just took that punch, and that was it. The right punch in the right spot at the right moment, and the fight's over.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I just want to cap off, sort of to finish off talking about this fight. How crazy was Robbie Lawler's lip? I mean, did you guys notice that before he got on the mic?
That was terrifying. That's one of those MMA injuries where you're just like, good God. It goes to show you how brutal this sport can get. Because you watch it all the time. You kind of get desensitized to, whatever. Oh, cuts, flesh wounds. Not a big deal. It's very rare that I get squeamish from a cut. But, man, that one was just nasty.
Could you guys imagine if it was...
the other thing, as much as we talk about Rory... I mean, Robbie Lawler took a lot of damage in this fight too. Yeah. And I don't think he took damage that's going to waver his confidence though, which is the difference. I think Rory's probably sitting there hurt. He's going to be hurting for a long time, and he's going to be filled with self-doubt. Whereas Robbie Lawler is coming out of there, and he's going to be hurt for a while as well. But he's going to think if I pull this out, I can pull anything out.
Yeah, I think when sometimes guys before fights talk about, he's, after fighting me, he's never going to want to fight me again, win, lose, or whatever, he's just never going to want to fight me again. I think this is one of those fights, and you're right, Tommy, sometimes you do get desensitized to the violence in MMA, and, for every dominant victory, like, say, Joanna Jędrzejczyk or Ronda Rousey, there's fights like this, there's title fights like this, where, both guys take a tremendous amount of damage, and even if you hold on to the title, you pay a great price for it. I'm just saying, he's obviously going to have, maybe not surgery, probably stitch it up, maybe he'll need some plastic surgery, but maybe Robbie Lawler should consider putting like a stretcher in there, making a bit of a hole in there now that it's there already, and that way he can breathe out of his mouth without actually opening his mouth. So, could be an advantage.
That's an interesting point there. I mean, we should contact him in the camp and let him know, but I was just going to say, it's lucky that he's the one with that kind of lip injury and not Conor McGregor, because I imagine you wouldn't be able to talk for a small period of time after the stitches are in so they don't pop. And can you imagine a guy like Conor not being able to talk for a few days? That would be an absolute brutal injury for him.
Yeah, well, Soup is going to be Robbie Lawler's good friend for a while. Okay, speaking of Conor, let's wrap it up. Well, let's start talking about the main event. This is the big one. This is what everybody came for. Before we talk about the fight itself, one topic I want to discuss, did it even make sense for the interim belt to be on the line, considering that Cain Velasquez, Pettis, and Weidman all had far longer layoffs than Jose Aldo? Tommy, we'll go with you first.
I think it made business sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Jose, he's not been gone or out very long at all. I mean, most champions don't fight for 6 months anyway. So yeah, in terms of actually, needing an interim, I think it's sort of at the discretion of the UFC. I mean, it has been in the past. You can see, look at like Dominic Cruz and how long he held the belt before they stripped him. And in situations like that, obviously they had an interim belt. But with this situation, I think it was just, this card was so big. They had put so much money into it. There needed to be a title. And I don't think it necessarily hurts anybody, really, honestly, because Jose's still the champion. He's still going to be the champion whenever he does come back. And for somebody like Conor McGregor, this fight was a test no matter what. If it wasn't on the line, whatever. But, having that at the end, that's just icing on the cake. But I think people really wanted to know whether he could fight a wrestler or not. And that was sort of, I think, honestly, the draw, at least for me, for this new matchup. Not necessarily that it was a title fight, but it looks good, when you're doing promotion, that there's 2 title fights. And so I got it. I understood it from a business perspective.
What did you think, Dave? Do you think the title should have been on the line, or do you think it sort of devalues the worth of an actual interim belt?
I mean, everything is it's like kind of the situation. In the situation they were in, I thought they made the right move. And it doesn't devalue the title, because if anything, the featherweight title, both of those belts mean more than any featherweight belt has ever meant ever. So, it was too short of a time. He wasn't hurt so bad. Like, if you're out for a year, I could see it. The idea that he's going to be out for a couple of months, and it hadn't been that long since he defended it. By those rules, no. But they were already in deep on this show, and I think they just kind of had to have Conor McGregor going for a championship, because it was just such a big thing. So I think they did the right thing. And, if it was a situation where they were devaluing the belt or cheapening it, it'd be one thing, but they really didn't. If anything, it just made everything bigger. So, I mean, it's like it's a rule of thumb that you wouldn't want to do, but in this specific case, it just was, it was kind of like what they almost had to do to save this giant show.
Dennis, what do you think? Interim belt, yay or nay?
I'll say yay, my friend. And the other thing is, if you don't have any kind of title on the line, is it harder to justify it as a main event because you got Robbie and Rory fighting, and they got the title? And I know those guys are happy to be co-main, but then you really get people complaining, oh, why are these guys in the main event? They shouldn't be maybe in the main event, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I like the title. I like the title was on the line. Made sense to me in this occasion, and a big yay for me.
Yeah, look, I pretty much agree with you guys as well. Like, in terms of having an interim title, I'm not a fan of interim belts, to be honest. I know there's some people who are like, oh, well, this guy's injured, put an interim belt. I don't really like it. To me, I rather see the real belt get defended rather than an interim belt. Like, even with Fabrizio Verdum, Mark Hunt, again, I wasn't really all for seeing an interim belt. I just thought it should have been another fight. And look at Verdum, he became champion anyway. I just think it really pads guys' records. With, oh, this guy was the next champion, and that guy was the next champion. It's like, well, but they didn't really beat the guy. In this case, like you mentioned, Dennis, if you're not going to have a belt on the line, how can you justify having it as the main event? And you're right, they invested so much money on promoting Conor McGregor, this is the Conor McGregor card, and then if all of a sudden he's not in the main event, I think a lot of people may have been confused or found it weird. Just a few notes on the fight before we actually sort of get into the nitty-gritty. Conor McGregor walking out second, I found that interesting. I really thought they were going to save him for number 2. Chad Mendes came out, obviously, with Aaron Lewis. I didn't expect that. I don't know if anyone else knew that Aaron Lewis was going to be singing him out. I thought that Sinead O'Connor sounded really bad when she did it live. I've heard, like, I've listened to Foggy Jew. I listened to it on YouTube and this and that. It's a good song. And obviously, Conor would have it before the Notorious kicked in. I was almost like, should they just kick in the Notorious by Biggie's, and just end this? I didn't like Sinead O'Connor. I liked the spectacle aspect of it. I liked that there was the live entrances, and I think they should do it more often for big shows. I just don't think she sounded that great. And another thing before we sort of talked about the fight, man, was it just me or did Conor look a lot smaller in these past fights? I don't know whether it's just his hair and his beard that made his head look a lot bigger, but I almost feel like he did so much media and there was so much stress on him. He may have even lost weight for this fight. What did you guys think? Dave, we'll go with you first this time.
Yeah, there's a physical difference, and I mean, he did run himself ragged promoting the fight like nobody's business. And they both had a disadvantage. I mean, obviously Mendes' obvious disadvantage is the short camp, and then that may have even played the difference in who won the fight. But he was run, that the problem with being Conor McGregor is that what they're going to expect. And, it was one of those things where I remember when George St. Pierre was fighting Nick Diaz, and Nick Diaz was doing no media, and George was out there, going like, I'm missing training days to do media. And, you never think of that going into a fight as a factor. But in a close fight, it is a factor. And you get these people that are counted on to do media, and they become bigger stars for it. But at the same time, in the last couple of weeks before a fight, it takes you away from very key training. And he made it work. But physically, yeah, he was a little on the smaller side. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that it was a 5-round fight. To me, like, it just seems like McGregor was doing such an insane amount of media and just the stress and anyone who's ever been on the road or is trying to maintain weight or gain muscle or whatever, I'm sure people can understand, how much weight you lose just from stress alone. What did you think, Tommy? Did it look like a different McGregor to you?
Yes, definitely did. There were rumors of injuries, and I don't know. He wouldn't really speculate on it. After the fight, and so I can't say that, but I do agree. I think his media obligations, and he does cut a lot of weight anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he looks like Skeletor at the weigh-ins. But yeah. I thought he did definitely look physically different. A little bit, not exhausted. I don't know. There's just something in his face. He looked a little bit beat down, but I think that, again, that might have been that life on the road. And I think that's one of those things about Conor McGregor that I think a lot of people take for granted because, like you said, it's not easy doing that, and very few fighters have been able to promote as well as he has, and do what he's done in terms of going all these world tours and so much. I mean, it's insane. He single-handedly, sold that fight with Aldo, even though Aldo was obviously a part of those things. If Aldo was against anybody else, this wouldn't have been selling like that. You know what I mean? So his ability to do that at 26 years old, I mean, there was so much pressure on him for this fight. This had to work, and hats off to him, because to be in that kind of pressure cooker, and you're on the road all the time, like you said, you guys, you're missing meals, you might be missing workouts, to come in there and fight somebody like Chad Mendes and find a way to win that fight, that's just amazing to me.
Yeah, what did you think, Dennis? And tell us a bit about your thoughts on the fight.
I'll tell you what. I think McGregor's gold when it comes to promotion, but I think when it came to this fight, I think he did too much media. I mean, I don't think anyone said that before, but I felt like sometimes when I saw him do some of the interviews, and I think I watched a lot of the ones that he did, sometimes he was an autopilot. I mean, he looked really, really tired a lot of the time, and he'd be sort of repeating the same stuff over and over. It wasn't McGregor at his best behind the microphone, and I think that's dangerous sometimes, because maybe it's too much of seeing someone. The mystique goes, and you sort of start catching on to the fact that, look, this is just a normal human being selling a fight, and not that this is like some, brash Irish guy, big star, suits, lifestyle. Because he had the embedded, he had the countdown, he had the interviews in between, you had all the other stuff, the press conferences. I just felt like he wasn't as fresh as he usually is. And I think that's dangerous. I think there should be a fine line between over promotion, using someone too much, and them not having their best material. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, promotion is a lot like a performance. And Dave would know a lot about that, because obviously in the pro wrestling world, that's what they call promos, and Chael Sonnen was great at that. When it came to him coming out, I found it very curious that he came out first. I'm a fan of the biggest star coming out second. Like, the champion, in my opinion, should always come out second. In the pro wrestling world, the champion, in my opinion, always should come out second as well. I thought that Sinead did a great job, but I did think that they should have cut it to the Notorious afterwards, because even though it built up the anticipation as he was walking in, when he got out to that arena, I thought the Notorious kicking in would really set the tone and get fans a lot more excited. I felt like fans almost didn't know how to react to it. They wanted to cheer, but Sinead was doing such a great job, they didn't want to disrespect her. With Chad, I liked the way he came out to the music. I thought that was quite good. But, not all Americans love country music. So there are some other countries like Australia and other countries watching that were like, well, we're not big fans of country music. And maybe it's the wrong representation of America, because there's a lot of different tastes. And because Chad was almost representing, it's like America versus Ireland. I don't know if that was the right choice for the music. But overall, I thought the fight was an exciting fight. I think that McGregor did let Chad take him down, which I found crazy. He got hit with a lot of punches. He had his hands down low. I suppose he was trying to stop the takedowns, but I was very, very impressed with him. I mean, Chad Mendes is an incredibly tough competitor. I thought he was going to beat Conor McGregor. I wasn't giving Conor much of a chance, and the fact that he was able to finish him was very, very impressive to me.
Just with the media, I think unfortunately in this situation it was a necessity, just because they spent so much time promoting the Jose Aldo fight and went on different talk shows and interviews, etc. Then that fight went out, and it's like, oh man, we got to do it all over again to promote this Chad Mendes fight. I think if you're gonna have Sinead O'Connor there and you're gonna pay a boatload of money, which they probably did, and flew her out from Ireland or wherever she was, I guess it'd be pretty disrespectful if they just cut to Notorious. But I think what didn't it's like, well, you're good for 30 seconds, but we're done with you now.
It's like on someone's iPod. They're like, all right, Sinead, that's enough. I mean, maybe they should have taken a page out of WrestleMania's book. I don't know what Dave thinks about that, but a lot of the time they get an act like U2 or Motorhead, do a full song before the person comes out, and then the person comes out to the entrance music or whatever they have.
I think for me, not to say that it didn't work, but it just wasn't as awesome as it could have been. And actually, Conor McGregor mentioned this in the post-fight press conference. He said he wished he came out a little bit slower, and I think that would have been good as well. Because Foggy Jew, it's like a war. It's like a war song. It's like you walking into war, and I've never seen anyone going into war like, hey guys, like bouncing around, skipping around. It's like, no, you might die. You're walking there slowly, solemnly, taking a lot of time to sort of take in the moment. And it was almost like Sinead was singing slowly, and Conor was like, not running, but going out there really quickly. And, sort of at an upbeat tempo. I think that's why it didn't really work as well as, I don't know, if say Notorious was playing. In terms of the fight, I mean, a lot of people are saying that Chad Mendes didn't have enough preparation. He said, he only had 2 weeks' notice. I don't think that played a factor not to say at all, but I don't think the fight would have gone any different had he had a full training camp, to be honest. And I was picking Chad to win this fight. I thought he was going to take McGregor down. I thought he was going to stay on top of him, and if he wasn't going to finish him, he was at least going to win a decision. And I think, honestly, Chad blew it. I think there was a lot of moments where he just froze in front of Conor McGregor. You know, people talk about when they feel the power, you know, they're frozen a little bit. I don't know whether it was that, but I watched the fight again. I watched it in slow motion, and Chad got hit with a lot of body shots, a lot of teeps, and I think that's why he gassed. I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that he didn't have a long training camp. Chad's one of those guys that always stays in shape anyway, so I don't understand there's a difference between being fight ready and just sort of being in that maintenance mode, but I don't really think it made a difference, and I think if the fight, you know, goes again, I think it'd play out pretty much the same. I'm just super, super, super impressed with Conor McGregor. I've never been on the bandwagon. I've always just been fairly impartial, just enjoyed his antics in general, but it's always been a question of, you know, how will he do against the wrestlers that the UFC have clearly, you know, protected him from. And in my opinion, even though he got taken down and he really didn't do much on the ground, I was also disappointed in Chad not being able to really pass all that much and do much on the ground. And yeah, wrestlers are going to give him a hard time, but from a standpoint of, you know, it was also a hard moment for Conor McGregor as well, getting a new opponent, because he's obviously been training for a striker this whole time. I'm sure he wasn't really expecting Jose Aldo to take him down. So for him to go up against a guy like Chad Mendes, finish him when a guy like Aldo couldn't, or actually did a long time ago against, I'd say, a much lesser Chad Mendes, just to me, crazy impressive. And then you factor in all the media that he did, you know, the possible injuries, you know, the massive weight cut, all these kinds of things. I think there was a lot of things going against McGregor, and even though he got taken down and sort of exposed a little bit, he still finished, you know, the number one ranked guy other than Jose Aldo. So I think he passed the test with flying colors. Dave, I want to get your thoughts. Do you think he passed the test, or do you think the hype has gone down on Conor McGregor?
Oh, he passed it like crazy, because I think that, you know, again, all he has to do is win. He did a come from behind win in a sense, which makes it even better. I don't think that people expect him to be indestructible, and he's not. I think he's going to be a guy. I think that's one of the great things about him is we know that he has weaknesses, but I think the thing that probably really surprised me more than anything, and I thought, again, you know, he was unproven to me. He looked great in his fights up to this point, but you know, it's a big difference between Max Holloway and Chad Mendes, and Chad Mendes has proven to me how good he is for years, and Conor had proven to me he's at a certain level. You know, he's good at this level. So I didn't know how he would do at the next level. But the thing that is, that guy can take a shot. That was the most impressive thing of all, because Chad Mendes landed the shots. He landed a lot of good shots early. Those overhand rights that knocked people out, and Conor never took a step back. And that was the real key, because like, even, you know, I think that may have kind of like mentally affected Chad Mendes, because I think Chad went in there with the idea that I'm going to beat this guy, I'm going to take him down, I'm going to clock him, and he's going down, and he clocked him several times, and the guy didn't even move. And then Conor would come back with those spin kicks that were just taking his breath away, and it was like, I sensed, it's like, oh my God, I'm in a fight with this guy. I don't know if he really thought he was going to be in a fight. I think that they had kind of like thought, hey, you know, he's a great talker and all. And I think Aldo probably went in with the same idea when Aldo called him the court jester and everything. I think Aldo probably thought this guy's a great talker and he's building up a fight, but he's not in my league. And coming out of this, it's like, you know, Aldo doesn't hit any harder than Chad. He's got good knees if he can land a perfect knee and all that. But if Conor can take those blows, Aldo will maybe be able to take him down. I mean, Chad certainly could. But if he lands those kicks to the body and takes Aldo's conditioning away, you know, Aldo's wind away, I'm more confident with him with Aldo. Before, I just thought that, like, well, what's going to happen when Aldo beats him? You know, because Aldo's just so awesome. And now I'm thinking. I mean, to me, the Aldo fight's much bigger to me. Before, the Aldo fight was just going to be a spectacle. Now it's like, wow, I don't know who's going to win, and you know, Conor's the biggest star, but Aldo, Aldo is this incredible fighter. I mean, one of the best fighters in UFC history. As far as well-rounded, maybe one of the most well-rounded fighters I've ever seen. But he's fighting a guy who just has some great movement and it's just so tough.
I just think it's insane how, like, Aldo Mendes, too, was Fight of the Year last year, and he was such a close fight. Like, dominated by Aldo, but it was still a very contested fight, and yet Conor McGregor came in there with a similar Chad Mendes, if not the same Chad Mendes, and just showed him, like, zero respect to really anything that he had, and then finished him in the second round. That's the thing, is those shots, I mean, he knocked Aldo down with a shot. He hurt Aldo several times with a shot. He didn't hurt Conor McGregor with those same shots. So to me, that is something where you see, like, what's Aldo going to do? I mean, Aldo knocked Chad Mendes down with shots, but he never hurt him like Conor McGregor did. So it's like all of a sudden, it's like you're looking at that stand-up game, and it may be an edge for Conor McGregor. And Aldo has never gone in there to start out wrestling guys. I mean, he obviously can do it, and he's obviously very good on the ground. We didn't see a great Conor McGregor on the ground off of his back other than a couple of elbows that he threw at a certain point. So the strategy may be, we know he can be taken down, so the strategy may be wrestle him, but then you got to keep that up for 5 rounds, and he's beatable. He's beatable by a wrestler, but it's not like you just put a wrestler in there and he won't be able to handle it. I mean, it's like it reminds me almost of Anderson Silva when Anderson Silva had lost a couple of rounds to wrestlers early on, and you said, well, if a wrestler doesn't gas out and goes 5 rounds, he can, you can beat Anderson by decision. And Chael even almost did it, but the reality is that when he finally got beat, it was actually by knockout. It wasn't by a wrestler taking him down and winning 3 out of 5 rounds. Yeah, it was historic regardless. What did you think, Tommy, when you were watching it? And also, I want to get your thoughts, because people were saying that the stoppage may have been a little bit early. What did you think about that as well?
In terms of the stoppage, I didn't think so. I actually had a conversation with Herb Dean a couple weeks back, and they were talking about stoppages.
And he said he was going to screw the fight, right?
He told me, he's like, this is a work, this whole thing. No, he was talking about, what they look for and everything, and Chad was done. I mean, people were saying intelligent defense. Intelligent defense is not curling up and putting your hands over. He was done. He was done. I didn't think it was a bad stop, and I don't think, people were saying, oh, but it's a title fight and there was so much time. That should not factor into a referee's decision to stop a fight at all. It's the safety of the fighter. And to me, Chad Mendes was done, and I don't, he didn't say anything afterwards like, oh, man, what the hell? I was fine. He clearly was not fine, and that left blasted him. So I was totally fine with the stoppage, and, I know some people didn't like it. They thought it was early. I know some people thought it was a work, which is just the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. People are just insane. But yeah, so I was okay with it. I like the stop. In terms of the fight, a lot of what Dave said, honestly, I was very impressed with his chin. Conor took some shots, and he was okay. He never seemed to lose his composure either. That was another thing that really impressed me in the fight. Again, I think the short, people were like, oh, well, Chad Mendes had a short camp. You only had 3 weeks to prepare. To me, Conor McGregor was at more of a disadvantage. Chad Mendes is a guy who's been at the top level for a very long time. And like you said, this guy stays in shape. He's training constantly. This is not a guy who, was out of shape 3 weeks ago. So to me, for Conor, I know he wasn't probably training for a wrestler. To get that suddenly thrown at you at the biggest moment in your life and having to do double the duty, the fact that he was able to keep his composure during that fight was incredible. And he didn't do a lot off his back, but he kept calm. He didn't freak out. And I think that's something that really impressed me. It kind of reminded me a little bit of, people are going to say I'm an asshole for saying this, Anderson Silva. I'm not saying Conor McGregor's Anderson Silva.
I sort of said that too.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of that fight with Chael, where he just sort of kept his cool on his back and waited for Chael to make a mistake, and then he capitalized on it. And I think Conor very much did that as well. He sort of played it out. He waited. They had that scramble after Chad tried that sub. He got back to his feet. And all that, that work on the body that Chad had done, or that Conor had done, and when they got up from that last bit on the ground, and Conor started walking him down, Chad looked pretty gassed, and the 2 shots that he took, that was all that he could handle. But yeah, I was very impressed with it, and I can't wait to see the fight with Jose. I don't know when that's going to happen or how they're going to do that or whatever, but I thought, honestly, the wrestling thing was the biggest question to me. I thought he would do okay against Jose. I wasn't sure. I'm not saying he would win, and we're talking about somebody who hasn't lost in ever. I mean, Jose Aldo is just ridiculous. So, I think the last time he lost was in 2005. But I thought he could maybe give him a shot, as the incredible striker that he is. But I wasn't sure how he would do against wrestlers. Yes, he was able to be taken down. Chad Mendes is about as good a wrestler as he's going to get. Yes, Frankie Edgar is there as well. But to me, I think he showed that, yes, he can do it, and he'll be able to stop a couple of those takedowns here and there. I think he stopped maybe 3. But yeah, I was very impressed by his performance, and I think a lot of people were. I think the people that were on the fence, or a lot of the people that were on the fence, are no longer on the fence after last night.
Yeah, the fence has been bulldozed. Dennis, what do you think, man?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I know you guys mentioned that him finishing Chad Mendes is impressive because Chad had such a back-and-forth fight with Jose, but are we forgetting the first fight that he had with Jose Aldo? And mind you, I know it was controversial, but Jose finished him quite quickly, obviously, over there in Brazil. And second time he fights one, a lot of people feel like they know the person a lot better. I mean, to me, it just sort of feels like it still doesn't say much about his fight with Aldo. And the other thing is, to me, it sort of opens up certain gaps in his game. I mean, yeah, I agree with you guys. He was lying on his back and sort of staying calm, much like Anderson Silva. And I know, Tommy, you mentioned Frankie Edgar, but I got to be one of those idiots that says, what would happen when Frankie Edgar gets him down to the ground? Because even though Chad Mendes, he did a great job, I just feel like he missed out on certain opportunities. And I mean, the second before he was knocked out, he almost had McGregor in the guillotine. So he was dominating in a lot of parts of the fight. I mean, if Edgar could handle the fight mentally, I think mentally Mendes did break a little bit. The moment was too much for him, like Dave said. I think in those situations, he could capitalize and beat McGregor.
Yeah, there were certain things even during watching Embeddeds and the countdowns. I noticed that Chad wasn't as confident in himself. Just certain body language that I saw. And I mean, that's just my take. I don't want to act like I'm some profiler. Like, oh well, he bit his lip. That means he's going to lose. But there's just a few things I saw. I think Frankie Edgar would be not only mentally strong, but I think he is the biggest threat. And no wonder he went up to the cage and said, I want to fight you next because who knows when Jose Aldo is coming back. I think that fight. I mean, I'm down to see it, but it makes zero sense to do it now. I think the only fight left to do right now is Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, obviously. And just a quick last final note before we talk about one last thing and we'll let you guys go. The ending, I thought it was a bit of a grey area. I was really surprised that Herb Dean stepped in that early. I really thought that he'd let it go for like maybe 2 seconds longer. When I rewatched it in slow motion, Conor actually hit Chad when it went to the ground with 4 punches to the right arm when they were on the ground. So it's not like he was hitting him in the head. The only thing is, I will say Chad Mendes wasn't really intelligently defending himself. And at the end, he didn't protest. So I guess I wouldn't say it's a bad stoppage. If Chad Mendes was out and he looked like he was done from the fight, then I guess that's all that really matters. But I was surprised that Herb Dean stepped in there that quickly. I was like, wow, that's... don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy or as a work or anything like that. I think those notions are ridiculous. But before we let you guys go, just one more thing I want to get your thoughts on, or me and Dennis want to get your thoughts on. UFC 189, they were saying it's the biggest event ever. Was it the biggest event ever, as the UFC are claiming? Dave, we know you're really good with numbers and you're getting these kind of results. I'm sure you don't have them just yet. But just in your opinion, what do you think? Was this allegedly the biggest event the UFC has ever done?
I don't feel that it was in the league of UFC 100. I mean, it was now best event ever as far as the best last 6 matches on a big card ever. Probably because the Stevens and the Rory MacDonald match were just like, I cannot think of a card that had 2 matches like that back to back. I don't think it was the best show ever because there have been shows that had, there have been some spectacular shows start to finish. This one really picked up around what was it, the 6th fight in, and from that point on, it was great.
Yeah.
I think that the fight with Aldo may end up being the biggest fight in UFC history just because Conor is so great at building fights, and this one gave him before, like we said, before there was this doubt that it was some guy who could talk really good in UFC was kind of giving him a quick road. The Dennis Seaver fight was like the perfect example. It's like a lot of guys weren't going to get Dennis Seaver right before a championship fight. They were going to get Frankie Edgar, or somebody of that level. And he didn't for a very good reason. They were wanting to make sure he got that championship fight before somebody knocked him off. But now I think that question is answered. I mean, he is the very legitimate number one contender, and he's a real title threat, and that's. But I mean, the numbers are going to come out. Atmosphere-wise, in Las Vegas live, it felt like the biggest event ever, atmosphere-wise, and that's without a doubt. I was at UFC 100, and that was pretty darn great too. Brock Lesnar was an incredible superstar that night. I remember Brock Lesnar and Randy Couture. That fight was, that great dynamic of everybody loving Randy Couture and hating Brock Lesnar, and those were really big fights as well. But the rambunctiousness of the Irish crowd made it seem bigger. The weigh-ins were like nothing had ever been done before. I mean, so for the crowd that traveled, it was the most impressive traveling crowd they ever had. But does that mean that it really was, outside of the Irish, the biggest fight in history? I don't think it was. But with Aldo, when you get the Brazilians against the Irish, and then everyone else just curious just because of the buildup that will be so big, I think that may be. But they were sure talking. I mean, it was interesting. For all this time they've been talking about, Ronda Rousey as the biggest draw and the biggest star. And somebody at the press conference brought up Ronda Rousey, and do you think Conor's a bigger draw? And Dana didn't say yes, he's a bigger draw, but Dana just goes, he broke all the records. I never said Ronda Rousey was the biggest draw. It was almost like, it was as close as you're going to come because you don't want to diss your other big star.
Yeah, Tommy, what do you think? And you're probably going to cover it in the latest Triple THS. Was it the biggest event, as many are claiming?
I am going to be covering it on the newest one. I'm actually been working on the artwork right before we started talking. You know what? I think it was okay. Just in terms of, I've been doing, I do live tweeting for the fights. I've been doing them ever since I started the show, so about 3 years now. I would definitely say in terms of Twitter interaction, this is probably the most Twitter interaction I've ever got. It was nuts. I mean, I could have tweeted out hello and it would have got, 150 retweets. It was really weird. But in terms of, I don't know what the pay-per-view numbers will end up actually being. I will say, it felt like maybe the most, I'll have to probably explain what I'm saying here, but like the biggest natural UFC card, because for me, Brock Lesnar sort of was an outside force that came in with a built-in audience. And obviously the MMA world became intrigued by him because of his ridiculous athleticism and everything else, but this was a guy who was already a huge star. Kind of like, CM Punk will be a big draw. But to me, I feel like this was grown from the sport. You had Conor McGregor, who had no fame outside of MMA or anything else before the UFC. So what the numbers will end up being, I have no idea. I don't even know if it'll break 1 million or not. But it definitely felt huge. They made it feel huge, and I think that's a big part of it. And much like what Dave said, a great start to sort of like a new era of the UFC and the way they're going to do broadcasts and everything with the drug policies and the Reebok deal. It felt really important, I guess, is what I'm looking for here. It felt like a very important card.
And that's an interesting part you mentioned about, having the new logos and the new broadcast sort of look with this card as well. Dennis, what did you think, man? Did you think it was the biggest fight of all time, or leaning more to UFC 100 or other cards like that?
Yeah, I'm more of a UFC 100 guy. I mean, technically speaking, and I mean, this was in 2005, their gate, and by the way, I'm looking at this on Wikipedia, so Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but the UFC 100 gate was 5,128,000, and the buy rate was 1.6 million. But to me, guys, all right, awesome. Wikipedia got it right, because I know sometimes people like to go on there and change around just to screw with people. I might be one of those people. But
Batman was in the main event.
Yeah, I might have been the founder of hip-hop. I don't know. But anyway, Brock Lesnar, George St. Pierre, the Dan Henderson fight, those to me were bigger names than what was going on this weekend. Also, a fun fact for people who don't remember, John Jones actually fought Jake O'Brien in the prelims of that as well, which is sort of funny to see when you look back on. And obviously the terrible fight between Mark Coleman and Stephan Bonner. Let's just forget that fight ever happened. But I'll say in the most recent cards, I'll say, yeah, this was one of the biggest. I was absolutely amazed. And Dave, I'm not sure how the number could be so high for the gate that they had, the total gate that they had for this event. I mean, I'm not sure if you know, but is this the highest gate that they've ever had for a UFC event?
No, the record gate was for St. Pierre and Jake Shields when they had the stadium with 55,000 people. So that was like a $12 million gate. This was a little over 7, but it was the biggest in Las Vegas by a little bit over. Essentially the gate, like when you talk about the $5.1 million gate of the Lesnar thing, number one, that was at Mandalay Bay, which is a much smaller building, and if they had that one at MGM Grand, with there's at the same ticket prices that this one had, it would have been the exact same gate. It would have been a sellout. There were a lot of Irish fans that were willing to pay anything to get in, which is one of the reasons you can have a really big gate, because if you're already spending a couple of grand to come, the idea of spending $700 or $1,000 for your ticket isn't as big a deal as if you live here and you're going, oh my God, spend $700 on a ticket. Maybe I'll just watch it at the bar, or I'll watch it on TV for $60. That's a lot of money to spend. So one of the things that I've noticed with the big gates is that when the shows that get the biggest gates are when you don't have Americans in the main event. Now, Weidman and Anderson. Weidman and Anderson was a big one. The second one, that was over 6. But like Jones and Cormier, which did great on pay-per-view, and I thought, the week of Jones and Cormier, I thought that was like one of the biggest fights in years.
Yeah.
Far bigger than this one. But it didn't do a great gate because, for whatever reason, it was that whole thing of like, Americans with 2 Americans are not going to spend the big money on tickets, whereas people who were flying in, whether it was the Brazilians supporting Anderson Silva or the Irish supporting Conor, the ticket price becomes no object, when you're doing that. So that's one of the things as far as, but again, like Sonnen and Anderson 2, that did the $6.9 million gate, almost 7. If you had a little bit bigger building, it'd have beaten 7. So those gates, of the big sellout crowds that we talked about, those 3 shows, the fact that this one was the biggest doesn't really mean that much to me. Because it's just, and it wasn't. It's just whatever the price was. These were sellout shows. Now it's impressive to me that Conor McGregor against Chad Mendes was a sellout show for a featherweight interim championship, when the real featherweight champion has never been able to be a big draw on his own in Las Vegas or anywhere, and not on pay-per-view. The whole thing of like if you put Jose Aldo, let's just say that these guys don't fight next. And obviously they will, but let's just say you put Jose Aldo against Frankie Edgar, and then you do a rematch with Conor against Chad Mendes, and you say, well, we're going to give him a training camp. The match for the interim fake championship is going to outdraw the real championship, 4-1, 5-1. So that really speaks volumes. And the fact that when it comes to sports, whether it's a Mayweather or whatever, any of these guys, Ali, if you look at, the really Ray Leonard, whatever, Oscar De La Hoya, these guys that were the mega draws. If you really look back on all of these guys, it took them years to get there. They became it because they became iconic figures. Floyd had years and years of not doing pay-per-view, and then he had years of 300,000 on pay-per-view, and then finally he beat Oscar. And from that point on, he drew huge. Conor hasn't beaten an Oscar De La Hoya. Conor doesn't even have an Oscar De La Hoya to beat to make him a household name. And he's only been in for 2 years, and he's only had a couple of fights in this country. It's unprecedented that he got as far as, even if it doesn't do 1 million buys, even if it does 850,000 or 750,000. The idea that he could do this at this stage of the game against Chad Mendes, that's ridiculous. Again, Chad Mendes, whose biggest pay-per-view was probably 235,000, going for the championship with Aldo. And that's the one thing that, like, out of this show is Conor McGregor is a phenomenon as a draw and as a talker. Even more than I think that anyone really. It's almost what's the word I'm looking for? It's ridiculous. It's inexplicable. I say that's the word. It's like when they first announced, and Dana was talking a million buys on this show, for the show when it was still Aldo, and I was thinking, like, what are you talking about? It may do 700,000, maybe because Conor's such a great talker. But now I'm thinking maybe it would have done more. And I now with the next one, I really do believe that McGregor and Aldo are going to beat a million handily, just because this guy's just a phenomenon.
Yeah, if I had to predict, I'd say around the 800,000 mark for this one, and that's probably being pretty optimistic. I don't think it'll necessarily break a million. And if it does, it's probably because of all the promo and the work they put in because of the previous fight, the Jose Aldo fight. I think considering the circumstances, it did really well. I'm just looking at the card again, and one thing that stands out to me is most of the names on here are new names. Like you've got Conor McGregor and Chad Mendes. Even like Chad Mendes has been around for a long time, and obviously Robbie Lawler's been around for ages. But like guys like Dennis Bermudez, Brandon Thatch, Gunnar Nelson, Thomas Almeida, even Conor McGregor. There's a lot of like new names, and then you've got a few of the old school guys like Mike Swick and Matt Brown and guys like that. But then if you look at, say, because I'm looking at other big events as well, you've got UFC 168, you had Weidman versus Anderson Silva. See, that to me was a massive, massive event. And then you had Ronda Rousey versus Miesha Tate, in another championship fight coming off a massive rivalry of Ultimate Fighter. Then you get to like the third last fight, you got Travis Brown, Josh Barnett. See, that was a good fight, but again, there was not really much behind it. UFC 148, again, Chael Sonnen versus Anderson Silva 2, another massive, massive event, but then you get to the co-main event, it's like Forrest Griffin versus Tito Ortiz, and it's like, fun fight, but really, who cared? And then you look at UFC 100, and it's like, you got Lesnar and Frank Mir. I mean, there was a huge rivalry and a grudge match there. You had champion versus interim champion, which I think is already bigger than this main event. You had GSP versus Thiago. Again, another title fight. And then you get to the third last fight. You got Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. I mean, that's something that could have been a main event in on its own. And then you look at the other card. You've got names like John Fitch, Akiyama, like you mentioned, John Jones, Mark Coleman. I mean, Jim Miller. There's so many names. They literally didn't have any other places to put them, so they had to put them on the prelim. So to me, again, I'm going to go with you guys and say UFC 100 to me felt bigger. This event to me, it almost felt like a big reset for the UFC. Not a reset, but it was almost like planting a flag and going, guys, have a look at the product. This is the direction we're going to in the future. We've got a whole bunch of our young guys. This is what the product's going to look like. We've got a new broadcast look, our new logo, all that kind of stuff, and this is the direction we're going for. So it felt like you said, Tommy, an important event, almost like a reset for the UFC. And, in terms of the numbers, I mean, hey, Dana White said it broke all records, but that's just my thoughts in terms of how it felt as sort of a viewer.
Exactly right, Cass. Some great points made, guys. Thank you very much for coming on to the breakdown. I mean, I want to let the fans know that haven't heard about you guys. I mean, it'd be ridiculous that they haven't, but if they haven't, I got to let them know where they can check you out. Tommy, obviously, you're on Twitter at Tommy Toehold. I'm looking forward to tweeting out hello to see how many retweets it gets. Guys, you can jump on www.ttths.com. Tommy's got a lot of really cool merchandise. I almost feel like whoever has the Tommy Toehold t-shirts at the events, they're like the popular crowd members there. So make sure you jump on there and buy some t-shirts for this big UFC November card in Australia. You might be some of the only guys there with the Tommy Toehold t-shirts. You'll be really popular. And obviously, Dave Meltzer, one of the most respected journalists in MMA and pro wrestling. I'm sure you're sick of people saying that over and over, Dave, every time you come on every show. But guys, you will be doing yourself a favor if you go to f4wonline.com. Dave's got a bunch of newsletters there. He doesn't just do pro wrestling, he does MMA as well. You've seen his great work at MMA fighting, and there's a ton of stuff for you to see there. And obviously follow him on Twitter at Dave Meltzer, WON. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on Submission Radio.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Had a great time.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time. Guys, we're going to take a really quick break, and then we'll be back right after this.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, that's pretty much a wrap from us. I feel like we've been talking for a while. Big thank you to our guests, obviously Dave Meltzer and Tommy Toehold, for coming on the show. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this special edition of Submission Radio. It's something that we may do in the future. If these crazy events do happen, maybe do like interim shows. The show will officially be back in its regular format with guests and interviews and all that kind of stuff. Next weekend, we'll be covering a whole bunch of stuff and a whole bunch of topics to talk about. In the meantime, obviously, like we said, don't forget to subscribe, YouTube, Submission Radio AU. Hit us up on Twitter at Submission AUS. US. And just a couple of things to mention beforehand, before we wrap up, isn't there, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. For everybody that lives in Melbourne, Australia, we'll be over at the Hex Fight Series 3. We'll be supporting our very own member of Submission Radio, Sean Davies. You may remember him from some of the MMA techniques that he does on our channel. He's done some really great ones. He's going to have his first pro fight at Hex Series 3. Me and Cass are going to be live tweeting it. And if you see us there, there's no excuses. Come up to us. I don't know what it is about us, Cass, but people will say, look, we've seen you at shows, but we didn't want to bother you. Look, you can never bother us. We're unbotherable unless we're in a bathroom stall. Come up to us, have a chat with us. We'd love to meet you, love to have a chat with you about MMA, love meeting the Oz MMA fans. And if you are keen on the event, there will be a weigh-in. It's going to be this Friday. If you're here in Melbourne, it's going to be at the Newmarket Hotel on Inkerman Street in St Kilda. It's going to kick off at 4:30 p.m. If you want to support your local fights, go down there. There's a guy called Nick Patterson who's going to be headlining the card. A lot of people are saying he could be the next guy that's going to be signed to the UFC if he wins that fight. So check it out. It's going to be a great event.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on down, guys. Super easy going, guys. And like we've said to Sean, our word of advice to Sean, because obviously we want him to win, we say, Sean, if you don't win, you're out of the family. So, and if you do want to hear a little bit from Sean, check out our most recent episode before this one with Ken Shamrock, Don Fry, and Dennis Bermudez. This is obviously pre-UFC 189. You get a chance to listen to Sean, see what he's all about. It's going to be a fun event, guys. Definitely come down. Again, like I said, that's pretty much a wrap from us. Before we pull the plug on this episode, Dennis, as I always ask you, is pretty much customary now, any final words for the fans?
Yeah, Southpaw's coming out soon, a great-looking movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, but I'm not a big fan of Eminem's soundtrack for the trailer. I've listened to it a few times now, and I feel like old M is letting his fans down a little bit with some of his new stuff. So in the comment section below, we'll switch it up a little bit. Tell us if you have listened to this music in the trailer, do you think it's up to standard? Because I don't think it is, Cass.
Wow. I'm a massive Eminem fan and always have been. I didn't even know that he had new songs out. I'm out of the game, man. I need to rely on you more to tell me when Eminem has new music. So for those who didn't listen to Eminem or don't even know much about Southpaw other than pretty much all the footage of the trailer looks like Jake Gyllenhaal is actually fighting Orthodox, which is weird to me. Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of UFC 189? Let us know. Is the Conor McGregor hype train even bigger than it already was? And was it the biggest event in UFC history like the UFC are claiming, guys? Till then, we'll catch you next week.